You know, some mysteries in history get solved over time, but others, well, they actually seem to challenge time itself. Think about the greatest minds in the world, the brilliant code breakers who literally cracked the most complex German ciphers during the Second World War. Well, they completely failed to read this 600-year-old book. And decades later, our most advanced 21st century AI, it failed too. So in today's Explainer, we're going to investigate what is essentially the ultimate historical cold case. We're looking at the Voynich manuscript, an absolute labyrinth of a book that has completely baffled linguists, cryptographers, and historians for over 6 centuries now.
Welcome to the Explainer. We're opening up the case file today, and here's our roadmap. We'll be looking at the physical evidence, decoding its bizarre contents, exploring a secret medical book theory, untangling its linguistic paradox, tracing its 6th century journey, and finally, seeing what happened when modern AI met its match.
Part 1. Physical Evidence and Forensics. Okay, let's dive right into this by starting with the hard physical evidence.
Because when you're dealing with something this profoundly strange, the very first question you have to ask is this just a cheap modern prank? But while text can lie, the physical elements of a book really cannot. Back in 2009, the University of Arizona actually did high-precision radiocarbon dating on the manuscript's vellum pages. This test firmly established a timeline, confirming without a doubt that the pages were created between 1404 and 1438. To put that into perspective, that places this book right at the dawn of the Italian Renaissance. That was a time in Central Europe when alchemy, mysticism, and early science were all heavily overlapping.
Now, let's take a look at the ink and the colors. When the Institute for the Preservation of Cultural Heritage tested the ink, they found it was a pretty standard iron gall ink, basically a mix of iron, carbon, sulfur, and calcium. Now, because it contains iron, the ink penetrated deep into the vellum on a molecular level. That is exactly why the text is still perfectly clear 600 years later. But here is the real twist. The colored pigments are incredibly cheap. I mean, they used basic azurite for blue and copper chlorine resonite for green. If this were some royal showpiece, it would absolutely have gold leaf or, really expensive pigments. So these cheap colors strongly suggest this was a highly practical manual meant to actually be used, not just put on a shelf to be looked at.
And yet, despite those cheap pigments, creating this book was wildly expensive. A protein analysis done in 2014 showed that the pages are made from calf skin vellum. To make this book, it required at least 14 to 15 brand new calf skins. And multispectral imaging proved these pages were never scraped or reused from older books. They were completely fresh. Purchasing that much brand new, high-quality vellum in the 15th century, that was a massive financial investment for a single project. Whoever made this, they were entirely serious.
But the forensic analysis also revealed a pretty startling structural anomaly. Codologists, those are the experts who study the physical structure of ancient books. They examined the binding and realized the codex originally had 272 pages, but today, only 240 remain. That means 32 pages are just missing. It leaves us wondering, who tore them out? Why did they do it? And did those specific missing pages hold the vital key to actually deciphering the whole thing?
Which brings us to Part 2, Decoding the Bizarre Contents.
Looking at the pages themselves, we can start to categorize the sheer visual chaos inside the book. It's split into several distinct but equally bewildering sections. First off, we have the herbal section. This features 113 completely unidentifiable plants. Seriously, they look like mismatched plant parts just stitched together. Some of the roots are even drawn to look like actual human eyes. Then, there's the astronomy section. This one features zodiac signs, but with a bizarre 15th century European twist. Like, Sagittarius is depicted as a centaur wielding a crossbow, and it also includes the famous Rosette's Folio, which is this massive fold-out map featuring 9 interconnected circles dotted with structures that look an awful lot like northern Italian-style castles.
But the absolute most shocking, and definitely the most heavily debated part of the entire manuscript is the balneological section. Here, the pages are just filled with dozens of nude women bathing in these bizarre networks of interconnected tubes and pools filled with green and blue liquids. These pipe networks look incredibly organic. They closely resemble bodily veins or some kind of complex internal biological system. So Part 3, a secret medieval medical book? The crucial point here is figuring out what those pipes actually represent, and this has led medical historians to a deeply fascinating theory. What if this is actually a secret medieval encyclopedia of women's health? To understand why they'd do that, we really need some context. See, in the 15th century, writing openly about female anatomy, sexuality, contraceptives, or abortion was considered a massive crime. The church frequently linked that kind of knowledge directly to witchcraft. In fact, a really famous Bavarian physician from that exact era, Johannes Hartlieb, explicitly wrote that any medical information regarding women's reproductive health absolutely must be hidden in secret codes and ciphers. The goal was to keep it out of the hands of the general public and religious zealots.
And this brings us directly to page 77 of the manuscript. Many modern researchers now believe those strange biological pipes are not just fantasy. They think it's actually an encrypted, highly symbolic map of the female reproductive system, specifically the uterus, ovaries, and fallopian tubes. If this theory holds true, well, the Voynich manuscript isn't just a random puzzle. It was a brave, desperate attempt to save and protect medical science from an oppressive society that forced vital knowledge to hide behind the cloak of magic and codes.
That moves us right into Part 4, the Great Linguistic Paradox.
Let's look at the language itself and see how this builds into an almost impossible contradiction. The script, which has been cleverly dubbed Voynichese, contains around 38,000 words, all made up of just 20 to 25 unique glyphs. Now, when scientists ran statistical analyses on Voynichese, they discovered something truly mind-blowing. The text perfectly follows something called Zipf's law. Zipf's law is a mathematical rule that dictates how frequently words are used in any natural human language. This means that mathematically speaking, Voynichese behaves exactly like a real, naturally evolved human language.
And this, right here, brilliantly illustrates the paradox that has driven scholars absolutely crazy for half a century. On one hand, it follows the natural, organic rhythm of Zipf's law, but on the other hand, it has shockingly low entropy. The words are mostly limited to just 5 or 6 letters, with these weird, rigid repetitions. Often, words right next to each other differ by only a single letter. To a cryptographer, these structural anomalies make it look like a highly structured, artificially generated machine code, or maybe a complex 15th century substitution cipher, rather than a real language. It is somehow incredibly natural and entirely artificial at the exact same time.
Part 5. 6 Centuries of Traveling.
To really understand how this delicate, bewildering puzzle survived all this time, we have to track its incredible 600-year journey across the world. The ownership history alone honestly reads like a spy thriller. Born in the early 1400s, it eventually landed in the hands of the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II in the 17th century. He was totally obsessed with the occult, and he paid an exorbitant 600 gold ducats for it. To put that into perspective, that was a fortune that literally could have bought a palace back then. It then passed through royal doctors and famous scholars before practically vanishing into a Roman library for 250 years. Fast forward to 1912, a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich finally rediscovers it. During World War I, Voynich's revolutionary background, combined with this completely bizarre book, actually triggered U.S. intelligence to put him under surveillance. They suspected the manuscript was a secret German spy code. Finally, in 1969, it was donated to Yale University, where it rests securely today in their Beinecke Library.
Part 6. Modern AI meets its match.
So fast forward to today, you would probably think that with the immense computing power of our 21st century supercomputers, cracking a 15th century book would be a walk in the park, right? Well, wrong. In 2018, researchers at the University of Alberta used neural networks to compare the text against 380 different languages. The AI confidently claimed it was Hebrew concealed via anagrams, but when actual human experts read the AI's translation, it was complete grammatical nonsense and historically impossible. And more recently, when advanced generative AI models were fed the text, they outputted a recipe for an alchemical golden elixir. Computer scientists immediately realized the AI was just hallucinating. Because it was unable to find a logical pattern, the AI simply fabricated one to satisfy the prompt. The machine entirely failed.
Now, some researchers believe the final key actually lies in DNA testing the vellum pages to match them up and maybe figure out where those missing 32 pages went. However, Yale curators have firmly rejected this idea. See, DNA testing is a destructive process. It requires scraping or cutting the original 600-year-old pages. Furthermore, there isn't even an existing reference genome for 15th century livestock anyway, so it might be totally pointless. This rejection is a powerful reminder that we simply cannot destroy precious historical artifacts just to satisfy our own modern curiosity.
Which leaves us with this final thought for our explainer today. On one hand, we might be looking at a heroic, brilliantly complex 15th century cipher, meticulously designed to protect vital women's medical knowledge from the dark ages of religious persecution. But on the other hand, considering the sheer cost of the vellum and that completely paradoxical language structure we talked about, it might just be the most elaborate, expensive, and successful historical hoax ever pulled off. What do you think is written inside? The 600-year-old mystery remains unsolved, just waiting for someone to finally break the unbreakable cipher.